Welcome back to the Many Toys Of, the show in which we go over the action figure history of various Transformers characters. And this time around, to celebrate 5,000 subscribers, we're looking at the Many Toys of Wheeljack. Before we begin, a big thank you to Oliver Newton4403, the Frickin' Cypherman, Choostafer5018, Will Jazz SM, Tyrese Henry 4176, Empress Mako, Quillimus, Bird Labs, Sir Tax Fraudalot, That Ginger Cosplayer, Pointless Guy BS53, Spider-Man 6194, Aiden Clifton 6325, Thundercracker 1984, Marvelous Ball, Reptosaurus King 8494, Polarity of Neo Soul City, and Elijah Stacks RF7LQ for all recommending Wheeljack, as well as hundreds of people who voted for Wheeljack in our 5,000 subscriber poll, making Wheeljack officially the single character with the most requests to get an episode thus far. Now, how would I describe Wheeljack? I feel like a lot of people would really focus in on the idea that he's a scientist. After all, in G1 and many other versions of the character, he's something of the mad scientist of the Autobot faction. But there's far more to him than that. Just look at all his other media appearances where we kind of pivoted away from him being a scientist and more into him being a weapons expert or an explorer. And I think that's the key to who Wheeljack is. Yes, he's intelligent. Yes, he's a very talented inventor. But what he is more so is a free spirit. A free thinker, if you will. Someone like Jazz, it's clear to say that they are their own person. Jazz is defined by his love for music and his large personality. Wheeljack is just like that in a separate direction. For him, his free spirit attitude has to do more with being allowed to make what he wants and the way he wants to make it. Yes, sometimes that means that they blow up in his face, but that's part of the adventure for him. In other continuities, maybe that turns into him being a lone wrecker trying to explore the universe. Maybe that turns into him being something of a struggling second father to a new Terran. Maybe it even means that he is a southern fried genius. But in every case, Wheeljack is his own bot. He's doing this not because he's loyal to the Autobots, but because he feels that this is right. And he's using his immense skill and talent to try to serve in the best way he can. Sometimes that means taking up a gun, and sometimes that means trying to make an immobilizer, or trying to get a little bit of energy out of these conductors. In many ways, Wheeljack is the perfect Autobot. He's not defined by one niche. He can be many things at once. He's multifaceted. At the same time, the one thing that is always present across every Wheeljack is his sense of right and wrong. And he is willing to call out when he thinks the Autobots are in the wrong. That's perhaps best shown in Transformers Prime, but even in G1, he's willing to call out Optimus Prime. He's willing to disobey orders if he feels it's for the best. After all, if Wheeljack were a loyal soldier who never questioned the orders he was given, the Dinobots would have been deactivated. He would have melted them down into scrap, just like Prime ordered. Instead, Wheeljack continued to work on them, and soon the Dinobots were the backbone of the Autobot army. Wheeljack sees beauty in life. He sees beauty in individuality. And yes, he sees beauty in failure. Wheeljack's legacy is without peer in Transformers, one of the true fan favorites since day one. However, only one toy could be his first, and for that we have to go all the way back to 1984 to check out Autobot Car Wheeljack. The vehicle mode is a thing of beauty. In that first 2 years of G1, the vehicle modes were always the standout. You could tell that Diaclone, and by proxy Takara Tomy and Hasbro, put far more emphasis on making the cars, the planes, and the microscopes look like they were accurate. Once Wheeljack transforms, he's still good, incredibly colorful, great design aspects like his backpack and his head. His missile launchers over his shoulders make him very unique compared to the other Autobot cars. And in a lineup with the Datsuns and Jazz, there's no question that he's one of the better looking bots just by virtue of looking so different. There is his arms though. And yes, that is the ongoing joke with this Wheeljack, is he looks a little bit more like an orangutan. His proportions are just a bit off. At the same time, keep in mind that this was a toy designed in the early 80s, repurposed for Transformers, and the fact that you were able to get such a functioning figure out of a car was revolutionary for the time. Wheeljack is a good figure when looked at the perspective of G1, and though we can poke fun nowadays, it's always coming from a place of love, because he is still a really nice toy. Later on that same year, you could get a Stampbot Wheeljack. You could use this guy to, stamp letters. Going into 1985, you could get the G1 Wheeljack toy again, though this time he would include a rub sign. You could get a zipper clip of the guy. There was also the small red rubber figure of Wheeljack in the Cybertron Hero Collection 22 pack in Takara Tomy markets. This would later go on to be a decoy. 1986 was not kind to Wheeljack in the fiction. After all, his corpse was in the background of one shot of the movie. That didn't stop you from being able to get his toy, though. He wouldn't be at mass retail, but now you could mail away for him in the digital Doom on the Highway to Destruction flyer that was packed with most Transformers toys of the year. In 1987, that decoy of Wheeljack was finally released in Hasbro markets. In 1990, you'd be able to get the Action Master Wheeljack. In robot mode, Action Master Wheeljack is incredibly well proportioned and stylized. He looks exactly as he did in the Marvel comics, though he is a little bit darker than you would have seen in the cartoon. Even though Action Masters have a little bit of a stigma nowadays, I've always adored them, and they're very unique takes on a lot of the G1 robots, and I don't think Wheeljack is an exception to that. He is a wonderful looking toy. And he comes with a sick ride. Check out this car, man. It is based off a Ferrari, for God's sake. And it kind of reminds me of Road Rage, maybe a little bit of Hot Rod. And even the car can transform and turn into a drilling vehicle. Yeah, sure, the Action Masters couldn't transform, but their rides could. You know, say what you will, I get it. Action Masters, not everyone's cup of tea. This is fun. If you did want the original Wheeljack toy though, if you were in Australian or European markets, you could get the Classics reissue of Wheeljack. Wheeljack didn't make any appearances during the Beast era, but in 2002, there was a figurine of him included in Takara's Super Collection figure line. You could get him in anime colors, or as pewter. 2003 would be a big return for Wheeljack. For one, you could get the Heroes of Cybertron version of Wheeljack. This is just a redecoed version of the Super Collection figure released in US markets. There was a hard hero bust of Wheeljack. Armada Wheeljack is one of the best toys in the entire line. And funnily enough, it's based off of the G1 Sideswipe mold. The proportions are just spectacular. I love how the missiles also act as batons in robot mode. And in that robot mode, the colors are striking. Not accurate to the anime at all, but striking. I especially love the design of the scratched out Autobot logo. There aren't many Autobot defectors in Transformers. Most of the time when we read about defection, it's someone leaving the Decepticon cause. So having someone who was going from Autobot to Decepticon still makes this Wheeljack pretty unique within the entirety of the franchise. In car mode, his gimmick allows him to have his doors open up and form something of a jetpack, though you can also launch out his missiles. In robot mode, there's not really much of a gimmick, but you do have to operate that gimmick if you want Wheeljack to transform. So perhaps the transformation itself is the gimmick here. In either case, it is a wonderful figure. That same year in Takara Tomy markets, you'd be able to get Legends of the Microns Rampage. This is just the Japanese version of Wheeljack, but he is far more show accurate and, in my opinion, he does look a good bit better. That same year, still in Takara Tomy markets, you could also get Rampage alongside the Air Assault Micron team. The hits just kept coming in 2004. For one, you could get the Universe 2003 Spy Changer Wheeljack. He is a repaint of Daytonus, which is already one of the best Spy Changers, and overall, it's a pretty fun toy. 2004 is also when Energon Downshift would have come out. Now, Downshift is heavily based off of G1 Wheeljack, but I am planning on making a mini toys of Downshift down the road, so we'll cover all of his toys there. Just know, this is where his legacy begins. In 2005, Palisades released a statue of Wheeljack based upon Pat Lee's rendition of him from Dreamwave. There was also Alternator's Wheeljack. Alternator's Wheeljack looks amazing in both modes. The Ford Mustang GT is a pretty cool car. You put Wheeljack's white and blue on it, sure, it maybe looks a bit more like jazz than Wheeljack, but it's a striking car mode. In robot mode, the head looks perfect, and I love the general design here. Again, it's not very Wheeljack-y, it's very much its own thing, but it is such a cool robot mode for Wheeljack. There's just one issue here. This is infamous as one of the single hardest figures to transform in the entire history of the franchise. Him and his mold mate Grimlock are seen as some of the true final tests for fans of transformations. Can you figure this one out without instructions and without breaking the thing? In 2010, BotCon released the Decepticon Slice. This is Slicer, though it is also Shatterglass Wheeljack. To learn more about this figure, go check out the Many Toys of Slicer. I just did that video a few weeks ago. In 2011, it was time for Wheeljack to get a new mold. Generations released a retool of TurboTrax. And even though this mold did work as Trax, I think it is much better suited as Wheeljack. The stocky proportions work for him better. The transformation is a lot more fun. The vehicle mode looks better as a Wheeljack than it does as a Trax. Even the kibble makes more sense as Jackie. I like the articulation here a ton. There are so many good points and deep cuts. The transformation can get a little bit bloated at points, but it's still a pretty fun process. You even get a flying car mode, just because, it had to be Trax at one point. The funniest thing to me, though, is that his little guns, his shoulder cannons, double as wrenches. Because they have the clips for the 3mm bar, it means that you also have a Wheeljack who can walk around and do repairs, or start building up his own weapons again. This same Wheeljack would be released in United that year in much more anime-accurate colors. 2012 was arguably Wheeljack's biggest year ever as a character. He was introduced to two new continuities, the Bayverse and Transformers Prime. In Transformers Dark of the Moon, Wheeljack was modeled after Albert Einstein and went by the name of Q. Even though he was not much of a combatant, he was a brilliant weapons engineer and seemed to have a good friendship with Bumblebee. Perhaps it was that pacifistic nature and the fact that he was a lot more frail than his fellow Autobots that he was able to be captured by the Decepticons, and then he was mercilessly gunned down by Soundwave, Barricade, and various other cons right before the Autobots were able to turn the tide of the Battle of Chicago. The MechTech Deluxe Class Wheeljack is a really impressive toy. It has an insane transformation, but a solid one, and they captured the very odd design of Q near perfectly. Yes, he's a very gangly bot, but he's more accurate than most Dark of the Moon toys. I love the head sculpt, and even the weapons are a ton of fun here. It's also cool to see how they remembered that Q was often strapped down with various gear and accessories. You get that here, and all those are just to make him more accurate to that scattered brain professor from the movie. There's just one issue. This toy was part of the final wave of Dark of the Moon. That final wave did not get distributed all that well, and in fact, it seems as though it never even properly came out in the United States. As a result, this is one of the hardest Dark of the Moon toys to get. Him and Soundwave used to go for triple digits on the aftermarket. There were plans to do a G1 homage version of Q, however, that toy was entirely cancelled. However, the Wheeljack that truly stole the fandom's heart this year was Prime Wheeljack. If Q focused in on the idea of Wheeljack being a scientist, it was Prime Wheeljack that focused more on the idea of him being adventurous. This is a wrecker, one of the greatest wreckers of all time even, the partner and best friend to Bulkhead, and something of the last cowboy of the Autobots, never truly loyal to Optimus, never fully willing to fall in line, and yet always happy to lend a hand. He was also, for a long time, the only Autobot that was able to leave the planet with his starship, the Starhammer. Even though he lost the ship, he still never truly lost that want to see the entire world for himself. In Season 3, even after he joined up with the Autobots full time, he was usually out just trying to see what Earth was like for his own self. Past that, he was a wonderful combatant, able to go up against almost anyone and hold his own. Perhaps best shown when he was able to go blow for blow with Prime Soundwave. This Wheeljack, on paper, seems very different from the original G1 boy. But in truth, these are all parts of Wheeljack's personality that are just being amplified a little bit now. And it made for one of the better renditions of the character ever. The first version of Wheeljack you'd be able to get came in the Cyberverse line, and he was packaged alongside the Starhammer playset. This is a very simple legend-scale version of Wheeljack, but the transformation's a ton of fun, the deco is accurate, and he does include his swords. Later that year, you could get Hyperspeed Wheeljack. This was a single-packed version of the guy, who was a little bit more G1 inspired. He was also released in Katara Tomy markets in the Autobot set multi-pack of the Easy collection, alongside Bumblebee, Bulkhead, Optimus Prime, RC, and Ratchet. However, if we're gonna talk about Prime Wheeljack, we gotta talk about the Robots in Disguise Deluxe Prime Wheeljack. Arguably, the best toy Prime ever put out. Incredibly well articulated, with one of the best transformations of the time, and one that still is incredibly unique by today's standards, with two wonderful accessories, including swords that have Cybertronics carved into them, a wonderful head sculpt, a great deco, smart use of translucent plastic that still hasn't had any type of issues all these years later, and an undoubtable personality infused within the form. You don't even have to pose this guy for him to be posing. Now, there's people who can make jokes about the fact that he's a little bit long-armed, but think about that even! How funny is this that arguably the two most important toys in Wheeljack's career as a character, his G1 rendition and his Prime rendition, both have gorilla arms. It's almost like it was meant to be. That same year, you could get Wheeljack in the ARMS Micron line, where he included a little friend who turned into another sword for him, because that's what friendship is. To bring an amazing 2012 to a close, there was the Prime Dark Energon Wheeljack. I talked about this guy in my Slicer video as well, so go check that out if you'd like to know more about him. Man, that is a ton of Wheeljacks, and we have a lot more to go too. But why don't we take a quick break right here and just veer into third party for a bit. See what some other companies have done to get this Autobot scientist in plastic form. The first third party Wheeljack I would have been aware of would have been the Iron Factory Hex Wrench. And this is a great looking IDW-esque version of Wheeljack. Very stocky and with a transformation that's just a touch finicky, but a wonderful way to start off a small but rather impressive third party run of figures. Toy World would have taken a stab at him with Whiskey Jack, and I do like this guy too. He is far taller and a good bit more accurate to Wheeljack's normal proportions. I also like how they added more color to him. It wasn't by putting things that weren't there, they just made the lines of the vehicle mode a little bit bolder, and that meant that there was a little bit less white on the go. Overall, this might be one of the better looking Wheeljacks out there, just because, well, it's a little bit more interesting. Don't know if this counts, but Shattered Needle also made an incredible little Wheeljack plush keychain, and I think it is the greatest thing I own, so now it's in the video. If you're more accustomed to Micromasters, you could get the Dr. Wu Iron Jack. I love this guy. Look at him. Just a cute little chunkster, and he's like 2 inches tall. He's the best. New Age Hammond dared to ask the question, you know, you spent so long asking if you could do it, you never stopped to ask if you should do it, did you? But it's fine, because as it turns out, they did it, and it was great. Hammond is an awesome toy, incredibly well painted, well sculpted. It's New Age, so it's always going to feel like $1,000,000. I do think that the missile launcher is just a touch too big, but if that's my only complaint, and think about how tiny a nitpick that is, I think it goes to show just how high quality this toy is overall. And that's a wrap on third party. I won't lie, Wheeljack had a lot less than I thought he would. But at the same time, maybe that just goes to show how good his Masterpiece figure is that there weren't any attempts to do another Masterpiece alike. Chug is basically dead in third party, so that explains why there's nothing of the more mid-range. And then that leaves just the Legend scale companies. Iron Factory did one, New Age did one, Magic Square will probably do one eventually, and that's it. I guess that's just the reality of the market, right? But it is strange because I hear so many people who fawn over Wheeljack, you'd think there'd be more of a market for him out there, in any guise. Of course, 2013 might be here to question that theory of mine, because this is the year we got Construct Box Wheeljack. However, if you want to build up a Wheeljack this year, you could also get the Street Showdown Wheeljack from Creo. I mean, the robot mode looks nice, I guess. And hey, the Creon's great. Popping back over to Prime, you could get the Beast Hunters Wheeljack. This is an amazing remold of that Robots in Disguise Deluxe Wheeljack. It gives him wings, claws, arm gauntlets, and an insane staff weapon. I know a lot of people weren't big on the Beast Hunters figures because they went for like a Mad Max aesthetic, but I adore this. I think it's so cool, and it makes Wheeljack look like Sephiroth. If you wanted that insanity in more G1 colors, you could also go to Katara Tomy Markets and get the Transformers Go Hunter Wheeljack. Same great sculpt, just with more classic colors. Going into 2014, Wheeljack would have a lot of oddities, but also some real highlights. Starting with the Goldie Marketing Thrilling 30 collectible figurine of Wheeljack based off his Prime design. You could get him single-packed, or in a 5-pack alongside Bumblebee, Shockwave, Soundwave, and an Insecticon. Movie Advance would do their version of Dark the Moon Wheeljack, giving him a more G1 deco and his concept series head sculpt. But I will say, if you're gonna do Q, why rob yourself of the full Q experience? I need that old man mustache. The Loyal Subjects would do a blind box version of Wheeljack that has no eyes and is horrifying. You could also get a version of Wheeljack that is in his Diaclone colors, though most people would just call this exhaust. If you went to San Diego Comic-Con that year, you'd be able to get Wheeljack alongside 30 other Creons as the class of 1984. The big toy for Wheeljack this year, there is no doubt, has to be Masterpiece Wheeljack. Now, this was the first time where Masterpiece started to go more towards toon accuracy over toy accuracy. However, there is still a ton of toy details in this Wheeljack. He is a wonderful transformation, one of the best in Masterpiece of this era in my opinion. His car mode is just gorgeous. It's hard to go wrong with a good Wheeljack. And when he transforms, he is incredibly well proportioned and articulated, and I love how they captured his overall shapes. I don't mean to objectify Wheeljack here, but he has something of an hourglass figure, and most toys forget that. They make him stocky or they make him lanky. Here, Shogo Hisui was able to incorporate his more, shall we say, curvaceous features to give you a more full-featured Wheeljack. Going into 2015, G1 Wheeljack would have a tiny Titan in the Robots in Disguise line. The Transformers figure collection would make a decoy-inspired version of Wheeljack. However, the single best figure of Wheeljack from 2015 is the Q Transformers Wheeljack! Look at him! Look at how cute he is! I'm about to cry! He has that really dark little head and he has the big blue eyes! Oh god, he's begging for a cookie! He can't even talk and he's begging for a cookie! He has articulation in the arms so you can give him a big hug, and then when he transforms, he's just a big penny racer! Why are the Q Transformers so cute, man? Why can't they make a comeback? That's all I want are the Q Transformers! The world would be a better place with the Q Transformers, man. Going into 2016, there was Combiner Wars Wheeljack, a decently extensive retool of Breakdown from Combiner Wars. I'll say it, this guy has some issues. He's maybe just a little bit too unpainted. However, the head sculpt is absolutely perfect, one of the best head sculpts Wheeljack's ever had. And it is kind of funny that we have a big combiner with Skylynx as the torso and Wheeljack as the right hand. I'm never gonna knock fun toys, and he is a fun toy. That same year, our far more painted version of Wheeljack was included in the Unite Warriors Linksmaster set. In 2017, there was an enamel pin of Wheeljack. There was also a vinyl miniseries version of the guy, who just looks incredible to me. In 2018, Super 7 did a Keisha Surprise Wheeljack, who is designed to look like the decoys from the 1980s. In 2019, Masterpiece Wheeljack would be given a far more animation-accurate redeco, and even though I think the toy itself looks a little bit more boring without those colors, he at least comes with the Immobilizer, which is probably his most famous invention from the cartoon other than the Dinobots. 2019 would be a big year for Wheeljack because he'd be introduced to another new continuity, that being Cyberverse. Here, Wheeljack spoke with a very thick southern accent, which I always quite liked as a fellow southerner, and he had a very long and somewhat complicated history with Shockwave. After the two of them basically had the single worst breakup science has ever known, they went into two very different directions for mad scientists. Whereas Shockwave was making abominations against creation, Wheeljack was just making weapons of mass destruction. Wheeljack was a constant delight throughout Season 2 of Cyberverse, and even in his sparse appearances in Season 3, it was always great to have him around. If anything, I just wish that we got to see more of whatever his deal with Shockwave was, because it's one of the few times we ever actually delved into Shockwave having, friends.
Wow, Shockwave! And, do they still do the thing?
The one-step Cyberverse changer of Wheeljack is an overall fun toy. He has a little bit of articulation in his arms, and he even has a missile launcher, which is kind of rare for a one-step changer. The Scout class Wheeljack from Cyberverse looks decent. The robot mode doesn't really look like him. Going into 2020, the Cyberverse one-step changer Wheeljack would be re-released in the Power of the Spark subline. There would be a tiny turbo changer of Wheeljack that is just way too cute. I love this guy. There was a figural bag clip of Wheeljack that for some reason is wearing Mickey Mouse pants. For my money, one of the best Wheeljacks ever came out this year with Earthrise Wheeljack. An incredibly fun transformation that is actually really localized to the legs. Even though the upper body does transform, the legs do some amazing tricks to get him into the robot mode. His car mode is slick, one of the best looking cars in the Earthrise line. Once you transform him, he is just a bit lanky, but he is incredibly accurate to G1 Wheeljack in those lanky proportions. His articulation's great. I love the fact that they remembered his backpack and his missile launcher. It'd have been cool if he came with another gun or maybe an invention of his, but that's beggars being choosers at this point. Earthrise Wheeljack was so good that he was repainted and put into the Netflix line this same year. In 2021, Earthrise Jackie was just so nice you had to have it thrice, because in Kingdom there was a package refresh of Wheeljack. In Cyberverse, you could get the Wheeljack and Grimlock Rolling combined 2-pack. Wheeljack wasn't just his own figure, but when you send him towards Grimlock, they combine into Wheel Grim. The Cyberverse one-step Wheeljack would also be re-released this year, this time in the Dinobots Unite subline. Going into 2022, the Cyberverse one-step changer Wheeljack was released again as buzzworthy Bumblebee Wheeljack. Slicer was released in the Shattered Glass collection for one final time. If you're more interested in learning about this guy, check out my Many Toys of Slicer. Jada Toys made a Nano Metafig of Wheeljack and released him in 2 separate 18-packs. Authentics made a Voyager-sized Wheeljack. For $10, you're getting a really well-articulated and great transforming version of Wheeljack. We would also get the Studio Series Bumblebee movie Wheeljack. Even though Wheeljack only appeared in the Bumblebee movie for a few seconds, his design lingered in the minds of fans. And when we finally got his toy, it was in one of the single best waves of Studio Series to date. You got Ratchet, Brawn, Wheeljack, Ironhide, Soundwave, all of these amazing Bumblebee movie designs all in one go, and Wheeljack might have been the best of them all. Incredibly well proportioned. He has the hourglass figure again, baby. When you transform him, he is a slick, futuristic car. His gun is good and weighty, makes it feel like this is a Wheeljack that is trying to survive in the heat of war. His head sculpt is stylized and a perfect modern rendition of that G1 spring face. They even remembered the wings. I adore this Wheeljack. In terms of fiction, the big thing for Wheeljack this year was his introduction into Earthspark. And funnily enough, you can make the argument that Wheeljack's one of the most important Autobots in Earthspark, because Twitch, arguably the main Transformer character in the entire show, and my personal favorite character in the show, scanned one of his drones as her alternate mode. As a result, Twitch sees Wheeljack as something of a father figure, with Wheeljack even getting the nickname Dad 2.
You're a new species. You have so much to teach us, so much promise.
Wheeljack's great character and arguably better design would make for an amazing toy. However, we never got a proper deluxe of him. We did get a one-step changer, and to be fair, it is a new mold, and it's a fun one-step changer to boot, but it just doesn't quite scratch the itch. Going into 2023, Takara Tomy would release their version of Earthspark Wheeljack's one-step changer, and with much better paint, it at least looks way more like his character in the show. You could also get the Tacticon Wheeljack. This is a finger puppet transformer, and even though it doesn't quite look like Wheeljack, it at least is a pretty fun toy. Popping back over to G1, there was an incredibly tiny robot mode of Wheeljack that was included in Masterpiece Skyfire. I already know people are going to complain about this. However, Wheeljack was also in Transformers Rise of the Beasts, even though he was only ever called Wheeljack on toy packaging. In all honesty, I consider Pablo as his own guy, without much to really connect him to Wheeljack aside from a copyright trademark on a toy package. Even still, I quite like Pablo, just a nerdy Donatello-esque character to hang out with this new Autobot team, and he had some pretty funny moments once the Autobots landed in Peru. Wheeljack would have been first released with Nightbird and Cheetor in a Buzzworthy Bumblebee 3-pack. This was the mainline version of Wheeljack as put out by the LA design team, and also my favorite version of this character in toy form. His colors pop so well. I especially love the blue of the headlights as they appear on the chest. His head sculpt is perfect. You gotta get those big bottle glasses right, and they got it so right. Even though there could have been a little bit more paint on the guy, I can't help but love that bus mode especially. So striking, so caramel colored, looks like a candy. This same Wheeljack would have been single-packed in international markets. Jada Toys put out a 1/24th scale version of Vehicle Mode Wheeljack alongside a 1/32nd scale version of him. There was a figural bag clip of Pablo. And finally, you could get the Beast Weaponizers Wheeljack. This is more of a scout class figure that comes with Rhinox. Rhinox is able to turn into a Gatling gun target master, whereas Wheeljack is just a really fun little toy. Don't get me wrong, when he turns to the van, there's a ton of panel lines, but it's a good transformation and a really nice robot mode. Trudging on now into 2024, there was a Titan Changer Wheeljack put out by Authentics. In Legacy, you had Origin Wheeljack. This Wheeljack is based off of his appearance in More Than Meets the Eye Part 1, the very first episode of the G1 cartoon. He transforms into his Cybertronian alternate mode, which you could very charitably call a boxcar, and you can even put Origin Bumblebee or Origin Jazz inside of him, just as Bumblebee did in More Than Meets the Eye Part 1. Once he transforms, he is somewhat stocky, dare I say even puffy, but he's very well painted and looks great. He even comes with his blast shield that he had in the episode. Now, I will admit, this is something of a hit-or-miss figure. You will either love him or you will hate him. You'll love him for all the reasons I just said. However, if you dislike him, it's probably going to come down to his price point. He is a bit shorter than most deluxes despite being a Voyager. Or the fact that his transformation is incredibly finicky. It's almost all translucent plastic stored directly in his lower legs. If you're a big fan of panel play, then this will be a fine transformation. But for someone like me, it's just not my cup of tea. If you were more interested in a more Earth mode flavored Wheeljack, you could get the Generation Selects Autobot Stand United 5-pack. This is Earthrise Wheeljack given his most cartoon accurate paint job yet, and they removed the translucent plastic to give him more opaque blue plastic. Popping back over to Pablo, you could have gotten the Studio Series Wheeljack, and I'll be honest, he's a bit finicky. I personally prefer the mainline version of him, even though this is far more screen accurate and still a really fun toy. And I love the colors on him even more. He's just not quite as fun to me. I will also warn you, Studio Series Wheeljack has a massive QC issue. When you try to transform his shoulders, there's very limited clearance in the chest area. You will stress the windshield by transforming him, and that will potentially lead to serious breakage issues during transformation. There have already been multiple reports of breakages. Wheeljack also entered a new continuity in 2024, making brief appearances in Transformers 1, perhaps best being recognized as the miner that caused the cave collapse that led to Elita 1 being fired, and overall just kicking off the entire events of Transformers 1. In that way, I guess you could say Wheeljack was the most important of the characters. The one-step changer of Wheeljack is heavily inspired by the Earthspark one-step changer, but is still a decent enough toy on its own. Blockies would also do a Galaxy version of Miner Wheeljack, which is a nice little toy. By the way, totally didn't forget about the McFarlane Page Puncher Wheeljack. No, did not forget about this IDW-inspired Wheeljack minifigure. No, I own this thing. I own this thing. It's been in this closet for over a year. I'll open it someday, probably. That brings us to the current day, 2025, starting with Studio Series Q. This is going to be the first easily accessible version of Q ever put to mass retail in the United States. And he does look a little bit limited in some of the photos that we've seen. However, no one's had him in hand yet, so we don't know. I am still very optimistic because he looks like he'll be a ton of fun. Trumpeter put out a really nice model kit of Wheeljack. This is the Bumblebee movie design, and I just want to say, I feel like I hear no one talk about how good these model kits are. They're very well made, good, durable, and some of the most accurate versions of these designs in figure form. That said, I won't lie to you guys. The real Wheeljack I'm excited for is Legacy Armada Universe Wheeljack. A pitch-perfect rendition of Armada Wheeljack, heavily resculpted from Kingdom Sideswipe, which was itself resculpted from Seed Sideswipe. This is a mold that has had so many reuses. Perhaps it should even be on Toys That Broke the Mold before too much longer. And I love that this is the newest version of it. It is just amazing. And that's it. I won't lie, I'm surprised how few toys Wheeljack has. This is a character that shows up a lot. He's not exactly A-list, but he's as high up B-list as you can be before breaking into A-list. He's appeared in multiple continuities, a massive fan favorite. He kind of occupies a similar spot to Jazz in a lot of ways. In that, yeah, we get toys of him a lot, and he shows up a lot. Where Wheeljack kind of stumbles is he's very rarely a main character. Even when he's an important character, he's never going to be the focus of many episodes or comics or stories. Just look at some of the things we've talked about, right? Prime was a massive highlight for the guy. But even then, he was never a part of the core team until Season 3. Up until that point, he was basically like the Green Ranger, just showing up every so often, and people were excited enough about him when he did appear, but he wasn't there to stay for long. In animated, he was a cameo. In the movies, he was basically a glorified cameo. In the comics, he was great. However, a lot of people weren't reading the comics around the times where he was very heavily featured. In Armada, he's awesome, but there's so many characters in Armada that kind of outshine him for different reasons. Even in places like Earthspark, where they could have really delved into Wheeljack, he only had a couple of episodes where he was a main character. It makes me sad because this is a guy who has had so much love from the fandom, and so much love from creative teams. There's no reason why Wheeljack would have all of these spots unless the writers and the toy designers really did love this guy. And it just makes me wonder, why have they never truly embraced Wheeljack? Why hasn't he become an A-lister the way an RC or a Bumblebee or an Optimus or a Ratchet have? Maybe it's just because there's not enough room once you get to that top tier. But I think there could be a spot for him. At the same time, we live in a world where Jazz doesn't get enough attention, where Bulkhead doesn't get enough attention, where Barricade doesn't get enough attention. There's a lot of characters who I think deserve that spot a whole lot more than Wheeljack. So maybe that's the reason he's held back a touch. In any case, it touches me just how beloved he is. The people who love Wheeljack, they're like ride or die. They're right there with him, cheering him on every step of the way. Keep in mind, this was our most requested episode to date. And it's entirely because so many people have something that they see in Wheeljack that they adore. Maybe it's his brilliance. Maybe it's his adventurous spirit. Maybe it's because of how cool he is in Prime. But I think there's something else. I think it's because we can all relate to the idea of failure. We can all relate to the idea of being beaten down, kicked around, having to pick yourself back up, spit out your own teeth. And that's what Wheeljack is. He is the epitome of, I don't care how many times I fall down, I'll stand back up. And maybe that means he stands back up to go back to his workbench, or maybe that means he stands back up and he's going to go another round with Soundwave. Regardless of what Wheeljack you look at, failure is not an end result. It's just one more step until success. And maybe that's why we all like him. But guys, I'll ask you, which was your favorite Wheeljack? And is there a Wheeljack you're trying to track down right now? Now, we have a lot of characters to go over in the Many Toys Of to-do list, but if there are any other characters you'd like to see, please leave them down in the comments below. I'm going to start up the poll for the 6,000 subscriber special as soon as this video goes live, so keep an eye out for that. And past that, I'm on Patreon now. $1 gets you access to my Discord server, Moonbase1, which is just a ton of fun. $5 will allow you to see videos early, and $10 will make you a producer. Not only can you make direct requests from me, but you will appear in every video I make from now on. In any case, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for 5,000 subscribers. Good God, I can't believe we're here. You know, I went into 2024 with 600 subscribers. I leave 2024 with 6,000 subscribers. It is insane what has happened, but thank you so much for sticking with me. And I guess we'll see what we get up to next time.